I spent weeks writing that toast, long nights hunched over the kitchen island while Daniel watched reruns of Frasier with a glass of Pinot in hand and our cat sleeping across my feet like a judgmental scarf. I wasn't just writing a toast. I was bottling a decade of heartbreak, growth, therapy sessions, one disastrous rebound marriage, and finally, this unexpected, luminous thing with Daniel that still felt too good to be real. I wanted it to be funny, but not cringy. Sentimental, but not too saccharine. Authentic, without exposing the entire roller coaster of my 20s and early 30s like an emotional yard sale. And when I finally delivered it, standing there in that candlelit room with pink peonies floating in mason jars and everyone I love looking up at me with tear-brimmed eyes, I thought for a brief moment, this is mine. This moment is just for me. I had just finished thanking my mom for always believing in me, even when I made it near impossible, and I paused to take a sip of sparkling rose. Everyone clapped. My friend Kim wiped her face with a napkin and said, "You're gonna make me cry, you bitch," and I laughed and curtsied like an idiot. The photographer snapped a shot of me mid-laugh, and I knew, deep in my gut, I'd look back on this one day and remember how it felt to be truly happy. That lasted, maybe 7 seconds. Emily stood up. Not slowly. Not casually. She didn't clear her throat or wait for the room to quiet down. No. She clinked her goddamn champagne glass with a butter knife like she was about to make a goddamn State of the Union address. And when all the heads turned toward her, half of them drunk, half of them still sniffling from my toast, she plastered on that polished pageant smile of hers and said, "Well, since we're all here celebrating love," the pit in my stomach formed instantly. You know that slow-motion sensation you get when you realize someone's about to hit you, but your body's still hoping they won't? That's what I felt. Like my soul had half an inch of hope left. But then she turned to her boyfriend, Chad. Yes, that's his real name. And yes, he sells luxury real estate in Phoenix like a character from a reality show you're embarrassed to binge-watch. And she said, "I guess now's as good a time as any." He looked confused at first, blinking like someone had called his name on the intercom at Costco. Then, slowly, like this was something she had hinted at but never quite demanded, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the smallest, shiniest box I'd ever seen. Dead silence. I heard someone gasp. Someone else actually whispered, "Oh my God." And Emily, God bless her, looked around at the stunned faces and winked. Right at the room. Right at me. If I hadn't already been holding the champagne flute, I think I would have thrown it. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean my arm twitched like it had a mind of its own. But I didn't throw it. I smiled. I clapped. I hugged her. Someone snapped a picture of us together, arms around each other, her holding out her ring like a goddamn Olympic medal. I'm smiling in the photo. But my eyes look like someone just stole the oxygen out of the room. Later, Daniel found me in the kitchen, pretending to scrape frosting off a plate when really I was just trying not to scream. He said, "That was something," and I nodded. He put his hand on my back and kissed the top of my head. "You okay?" he asked. And I said the biggest lie I've ever told. I said, "Of course." I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. I kept replaying it in my head, not the moment she stood up, not the look on her smug little face when people congratulated her, but the wink. That wink hit me like a slap from someone who knows exactly where to land it so it doesn't leave a bruise. It wasn't a nervous tick or some flirty instinct. It was calculated. Planned. It was her way of saying, this was mine all along. What burned even more was that no one seemed to question it. No one pulled her aside and said, "Emily, really? At your sister's bridal shower." No one told her it was inappropriate or selfish or unbelievably tone-deaf. They all just cooed and complimented her ring and asked about the date. By the time the night ended, it felt like my shower had been nothing more than a prelude to her engagement reveal. I might as well have been holding her purse while she stole the show. The next day, still raw and puffy-eyed, I called Kim and vented the whole thing again, even though she was there and had already heard it all in real time. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know what's weird? I overheard Chad telling someone at the bar that he had planned to propose in Mexico next month." I blinked hard, gripping the phone like it might explode in my hand. "What?" I asked. "Yeah," she continued. "He said he had the ring in a suitcase already, and Emily was begging him not to wait. Said she couldn't stand being around you engaged while she wasn't." I didn't even respond. I just sat there, staring out the window, while the pieces slid into place like puzzle edges snapping together. The proposal wasn't spontaneous. The ring wasn't hidden in his coat for romance. It was dragged out of him like a reluctant confession. She hadn't just hijacked my moment. She forced it, orchestrated it, like the whole thing had been rehearsed in her head, right down to the fucking wink. And that's when it happened, the shift. You know that subtle tilt your brain does when anger overtakes disbelief? When grief curdles into something colder. I didn't cry after that. I didn't even rage. I just smiled. Because if Emily wanted a game, I could play. The morning after the shower felt like waking up in someone else's life, like I had gone to bed a bride-to-be and opened my eyes to find I'd become the background character in my own engagement. I made coffee and stared out the window for almost an hour, watching a squirrel steal pieces of a croissant someone had dropped on the sidewalk, which somehow felt metaphorically appropriate. Daniel came out in his plaid pajama pants and asked if I was still mad, which was cute because as much as I love him, he still didn't understand the very specific kind of rage that only sisters can manufacture in each other. The kind that simmers quietly under your skin like an old bruise you keep pressing just to remember what it felt like. We didn't talk about Emily's stunt over breakfast. Instead, we flipped through the binder our wedding planner gave us, the one with 3 different tabs labeled vendors, timelines, and potential meltdowns. We'd gotten a call the night before from the venue coordinator saying they'd double-booked the original weekend, something about a charity gala for some foundation whose name sounded like it was invented by a tech bro trying to get a tax write-off. Either way, we had no choice but to move the date unless we wanted to risk getting married in the loading dock. So we picked a new one, the only open slot that didn't push us into winter, a weekend in late August, warm but not scorching, just after the kids went back to school and flights were still reasonable. I didn't even flinch when Daniel said, "Wait, isn't that around the time of Emily's Bachelorette?" I just smiled and replied, "Is it?" while pretending to mark it innocently in the planner, the way a snake might blink at you before striking. We sent out the emails that afternoon, copied to everyone on both sides of the family, along with updated save-the-date notices for those who hadn't booked travel yet. I added a short, cheerful note about how excited we were to see everyone and how grateful we were for their flexibility. It was the kind of tone that, if printed on paper, would have smelled like lavender. And then I waited. It didn't take long. The first reply was from our cousin Denise, who didn't even notice the overlap and just said she was thrilled to come. The second was from Daniel's college roommate, who said he'd adjust his work schedule. But the third one? Oh, the third one came in like a heat-seeking missile. Emily didn't email. She called. And I knew it was her before I even picked up because the caller ID popped up with her full name, something she only did when she was about to be official and righteous and dramatic. I answered with my best innocent voice, like I didn't hear the static of fury bleeding through the receiver. "What the hell is this?" she hissed. "Hey, I said, keeping my tone warm and breezy. "Did you get the new date?" We had to move it. The venue totally screwed us. "Don't play dumb," she snapped, and I could practically hear her pacing. "You knew my Bachelorette is that weekend. You knew. You did this on purpose." Now, was it technically true that I remembered the weekend from her original group text that she sent to her bridal party, of which I was not included, by the way, which I'm still salty about? Yes. Was it also true that I didn't try very hard to avoid that weekend once I realized it was our only real option and a little poetic revenge would feel like medicine? Also, yes. But instead of confessing any of that, I let out a soft gasp, the kind you hear in soap operas right before someone faints. "Oh no," I said. I didn't even connect the two. I've just been so swamped. There was a long silence, followed by the sound of her exhaling like a kettle just about to scream. You are so full of it, Rachel. Now here's where I should have apologized, maybe tried to make peace, said something soothing to salvage things before they spiraled. But I didn't. I leaned into it. Because something had cracked in me since the wink, and once it's cracked, it keeps spreading like a spiderweb. Emily, I said, lowering my voice so Daniel wouldn't hear me from the next room, if your weekend is so important that it means more to you than showing up for your sister's wedding, then that's your decision. I won't take it personally. It was one of those lines that sounds polite on the surface, but underneath, it's a dagger dipped in honey. She went quiet again, but not because I'd won. It was the kind of silence that meant she was loading the next round. You always do this, she finally said. Make yourself the victim and act like I'm the monster. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her what planet she lived on where hijacking my bridal shower made me the drama queen. But instead, I just smiled and said we had sent out over 357 invites. Which is wild, considering we only invited about 84 people. Don't ask me how that math works, because I failed geometry twice. She hung up on me after that. I think she realized I wasn't going to play the role she wrote for me. And maybe that scared her a little. Or maybe it pissed her off more than anything else I could have said. Daniel walked in and raised an eyebrow. She's not thrilled, he asked. She's considering skipping the wedding, I replied, popping a piece of stale biscotti into my mouth like it was a victory snack. Would that really be so bad, he asked. I shrugged. Your guess is as good as mine. But in my heart, I knew exactly what this meant. Emily had declared war. And the problem was, I wasn't planning to lose. And the best part? I hadn't even started yet. There is a moment when your anger turns from fire to ice, when the burning fades and what's left is this cold, clean clarity that's actually more dangerous than the fury ever was. It's like this new version of you emerges, smarter and quieter, someone who doesn't need to shout to be heard, because she knows exactly where to place the knife and twist, just enough to draw blood without leaving a mess. That's who I became the week after Emily blew up over the wedding date and stormed out of that phone call like she was the wronged party in a drama she had written and cast herself in. I started small, almost delicately, with a little comment here, a whisper there, the kind of gossip that doesn't feel like gossip until it starts growing legs and sprinting down the street. At brunch with my college girlfriends, the ones who know both me and Emily because we all used to tailgate together before life pulled us in different directions, I casually mentioned that Emily had asked me for Daniel's ring size 2 months before he proposed. One of them blinked and said, "Wait, she knew it was happening?" And I just shrugged and said, I don't know, she's just always been intuitive like that. Another time, at a work happy hour where my coworker Molly, who also happens to go to bar classes with Emily, asked how the family was doing, I smiled and said something like, it's funny. Chad told Daniel he'd planned to propose during their Mexico trip in April, but Emily must have changed his mind somehow. She's always been very persuasive when she wants something. I didn't say she pressured him. I didn't say she gave him an ultimatum. I just let that little ember of suggestion float into the air and watched people inhale it like secondhand smoke. Within a week, I could feel the shift. The questions started to trickle in through texts and Instagram DMs. My cousin Lily sent me a message that just said, "Was it awkward when Emily hijacked the shower like that?" And I replied, "Awkward for her maybe." Then I waited. 5 hours later she wrote, "She's been really touchy lately. Is everything okay?" I didn't respond to that one. Sometimes silence is louder than words. But the real masterpiece happened at our monthly family brunch, which my mom still insists on hosting even though half the time people flake or show up late or leave before the eggs get cold. Emily and Chad were there, both dressed like they were going to a country club promo shoot, and I had spent the entire morning wondering if I'd do it or not. But the moment came when Chad asked if anyone had seen the new wine bar that opened downtown, and I said, "Oh yeah, I think that's where Emily went with Josh last year, right?" Silence. Like slap you in the face silence. Josh, in case you're wondering, is Emily's ex. Not a long-term ex. Not a high school sweetheart. No, Josh was the guy she dated for about 3 months last year during one of her "I don't believe in labels anymore" phases, the same guy who ghosted her after he ran into her and Chad at the same wedding in May. Emily's fork clinked against her plate like she'd lost grip for half a second, but her face didn't crack. That's what made it beautiful. She kept smiling like she hadn't heard me, but Chad? Oh, Chad looked like he'd just swallowed a lemon rind whole. He stared at her for a solid 10 seconds, then said, "You never told me you went there with someone." Emily's voice was syrupy when she replied, "Oh, it wasn't a date, just drinks." I didn't look at anyone. I just sipped my mimosa like it was water and kept my eyes on my plate, heart pounding but steady, like a sniper waiting for the next clean shot. And after that, I didn't need to say much. The story moved on its own. People started talking, not just about her proposal hijacking, but about everything. Her jealousy, her obsession with attention, the way she always needed to be the most important woman in every room, even if it meant bulldozing someone else's moment to do it. I thought I was done. I thought I'd played my hand, subtle but effective, just enough to tip the scale without tipping it over. Then the letter came. It was tucked between our mail like an afterthought, no return address, just my name written in block letters with slightly uneven slants. At first, I thought it was one of those weird handwritten ads for home cleaning services or some passive-aggressive HOA announcement. But when I opened it and saw Chad's name at the bottom, my stomach dropped through the floor. His handwriting was careful, like he'd rewritten it more than once. It started polite. He said he hoped the wedding planning was going well, that he admired how much grace I'd shown given recent events. And then the tone shifted. He said he didn't know who to talk to, that he wasn't sure if Emily had told me the whole truth about their relationship. Then came the part that made my hands go cold. He wrote that he'd been thinking about something that happened last fall, a period when he and Emily were supposedly exclusive, and a night she came home late, smelling like someone else's cologne. He said he didn't want to assume, he didn't want to accuse, but he felt like he was walking into a marriage built on something fragile, something false. He asked me if I thought she was capable of cheating. I read the letter 3 times, my pulse drumming in my ears. And then I folded it up, placed it back in the envelope, and stared at it on the counter for a long time. Because the answer wasn't simple. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to give it. There's a particular flavor of silence that comes after you've read something that reconfigures the person you thought someone was, a dense and hollow quiet that settles not just in your ears, but in your chest. Like someone took all the air out of the room and left you holding a version of the truth you weren't ready for. That was me, standing barefoot in my kitchen, holding Chad's letter in one hand like it might turn to fire, rereading that line about the late night, the unfamiliar cologne, the vague but pointed suspicion that maybe Emily hadn't just rushed the proposal. Maybe she'd rushed to lock it all down because the walls were closing in around her. At first, I didn't want to believe it, not because I thought Emily incapable. God knows her moral compass has been spinning off axis since the day she discovered how to weaponize charm, but because something about this crossed a line even for her. I had always seen her as manipulative, sure, a little too polished, too rehearsed in her sweetness, like a Southern belle with a vendetta. But cheating? That was something else entirely. That wasn't just selfish, that was sabotage turned inward, an act of destruction not just aimed at others, but detonated from within. I didn't answer Chad's letter, not immediately. I folded it neatly and placed it inside the drawer where we keep expired coupons and broken pens, and that one battery we always assume still works. I needed time, not just to think, but to watch. Emily wasn't dumb. She was many things: exhausting, insecure, toxic in ways that left residue on your skin long after she hugged you, but she wasn't stupid. If I came at her directly, she'd deflect, deny, flip the script so fast I'd be apologizing for even asking. No. I needed something more precise. Something quieter. That's when I invited her to the spa. It was a test, and maybe also a trap, but I coded it in warmth and good intentions, calling her up with just the right amount of sisterly enthusiasm, saying I wanted one day with her, just the two of us, like old times. She hesitated at first, maybe sensing something off, or maybe still pissed about the wedding date, but eventually she agreed, probably because she couldn't resist the idea of someone pampering her for 3 hours straight. The day of the spa, I wore my most neutral tone and let her talk. And talk she did about wedding colors, flower shortages, the trauma of bridesmaid dress fittings, how Chad was suddenly moody and distant, but she figured it was just stress. I nodded, sipping cucumber water like it was champagne, watching her face the whole time. She was good. She smiled in all the right places, even laughed at her own drama like she was in on the joke. But I could see it now, beneath the gloss, a hairline crack widening with every word. It wasn't until we were lying side by side in those soft white robes, half drowsy under the hands of 2 massage therapists, that I dropped the line. I timed it between exhalations, like I was barely aware I'd said it. Must be hard keeping your timeline straight, huh? It was like dropping a match into a puddle of gasoline. She didn't move right away, but her eyelids twitched, and I felt the tension in her body spike like someone had flipped a switch. Her masseuse kept going, unaware, but Emily's hands curled slightly, her mouth opened for a second like she was going to say something, then shut again. When she finally spoke, it came out as a flat little laugh, like she thought I was joking but wasn't sure. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, voice too casual. I didn't open my eyes. I just let my lips turn upward the slightest bit and said, "Oh, nothing. Just wondering how you keep all the dates straight with so much going on. Must be exhausting." She was silent for a full minute, maybe more. When I glanced over, her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling like it might tell her what to say. I went back to my massage, not pushing, not explaining. I didn't need to. The message had landed. The seed was planted. That night she didn't call me, didn't text, not even a half-hearted "thanks for today." And when I looked at her Instagram, I noticed she had archived, not deleted, but hidden, 3 photos of her and Chad from last fall. Small, subtle, but obvious if you knew what to look for. A few days later, the RSVP list for the wedding was almost finalized. Everyone had responded except for Emily and Chad. I figured they were circling each other, dancing around whatever unspoken thing had passed between us at the spa, maybe arguing about what I knew or what Chad suspected or what Emily refused to admit. Then came the rehearsal dinner. It was at the vineyard we'd booked months earlier. Long wooden tables and fairy lights strung through the trees, the kind of evening that felt plucked from a rom-com if you squinted hard enough. People were laughing, toasting, practicing their speeches. My mother was already half in tears, holding Daniel's hand like she'd won the son she never had. And then I saw her. Emily. Alone. No Chad. No explanation. Just her, in a perfectly pressed white dress that almost dared someone to ask if she was okay. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. She walked over slowly, heels crunching against the gravel, and hugged me with arms that felt stiff, like she was trying not to collapse. "Sorry I didn't confirm sooner," she said, her voice thin. "But I'll be there tomorrow." Of course. She didn't say where Chad was. She didn't offer a reason. And I didn't ask. Because whatever storm had hit them, whatever reckoning had come from that letter, or that cologne-soaked night, or the spa table where a single sentence had detonated years of deflection, it had clearly arrived. She was still standing. But I could tell she didn't know for how long. There's something surreal about walking down the aisle when everything around you is so meticulously perfect that it almost feels fake, like a high-budget movie set designed to look like a wedding, complete with symmetrical rows of white folding chairs. A breeze that flutters just enough to lift your veil without slapping it across your face, and a string quartet playing the exact song you first slow danced to with your fiancé in your old apartment kitchen, barefoot, and wine drunk, 5 months after you met. Everything about that moment was designed to be remembered, but I couldn't stop thinking about the one person in that crowd I wished wasn't there. Emily sat in the third row on the right side, not quite close enough to be family of the bride prominent, but just visible enough to remind me that she had come, and she had come alone. Her posture was flawless, her hair pinned back in a soft chignon that screamed professional blowout, and her expression was unreadable in that carefully blank way you see on lawyers during closing arguments. But her eyes didn't move much. She kept them forward, locked somewhere near the altar, maybe at the flowers, maybe at the minister, maybe just beyond the moment, as if she were already planning her exit strategy. I hadn't told Daniel what had gone down with the letter. He'd known about the fallout with Emily, of course. I wasn't that good an actress, but I hadn't told him about the cheating suspicion or the envelope tucked into my purse, heavy with implication and folded truth. I didn't want that weight in our vows. I wanted him to hear words spoken from a place of love, not vengeance, even if vengeance was still humming somewhere in the background like a low electric buzz. And so I said the words I had written long before the spa day and the phone calls and the secrets. I talked about finding light after darkness, about learning what real partnership meant, about how Daniel had taught me to trust again, not just other people, but myself. My voice didn't shake. I saw my mother cry. I saw my father nod, jaw tight, the way he always did when he was trying not to show emotion. And I saw Emily blink hard, as if the words were making her uncomfortable, which, frankly, I hoped they were. The ceremony ended in applause and a kiss and rose petals, and then came the mingling, the champagne toasts, the congratulations that felt both surreal and sweet. There was a moment when Daniel leaned into me and whispered, "This is the happiest I've ever been," and I felt it, this burst of calm joy that almost made me forget what I was still holding inside my bag. But only almost. Because after the last speech and the first slice of cake and the song I danced to with my dad, I walked straight across the lawn, past the clinking glasses and the warm string of overhead lights, to where Emily stood alone near the bar, sipping something clear with a twist of lime and pretending not to be studying every face that passed her. She didn't flinch when she saw me coming. She just straightened her spine, like she was bracing for impact. "Congratulations," she said, and to her credit, her voice didn't even wobble. "Thanks," I said, and handed her the envelope. She looked down at it for a second, confused, then opened the flap slowly, like she knew what was inside before she saw it. Her fingers paused on the first page, Chad's handwriting, careful and steady, and I could see her reading the salutation. Her eyes didn't move beyond that. She looked up at me instead. "You kept it?" she asked softly. "I kept it," I said. "And I thought about it. A lot." She swallowed hard, but didn't ask what else it said. Maybe she already knew. Maybe she didn't need to. "I'm not showing this to anyone else," I added, my voice even. "This isn't about revenge. It's about what you do next." She nodded, eyes flickering like they couldn't decide whether to fill with tears or fire. I slipped a second page into her hand, a note I had written the night before, short and pointed and folded in thirds. "You can lie to everyone else, but don't lie to the man you say yes to." That's all it said. She didn't open that one in front of me. She tucked it back into the envelope, turned away, and left the reception before the dancing even started. I watched her heels disappear across the gravel path, and for a second, I felt something that wasn't quite victory and wasn't quite regret. Maybe it was relief. Or maybe it was just release. 2 weeks passed. No calls. No updates. The world moved on, as it always does, and I filled the quiet with thank you cards and leftover cake and newlywed logistics, joint accounts, new insurance paperwork, arguments about towels that were really arguments about control. Daniel was sweet through it all, patient in a way that made me want to protect him even more fiercely from the mess I'd just cleaned up behind the scenes. Then I got the news from my cousin Lily, who had heard from someone in Emily's bridal party. Emily's wedding had been postponed. Indefinitely. No date rescheduled. No reason given. Just an announcement from the venue saying the event had been canceled and a refund was being processed. It felt like breathing in cold air after a storm, clean but sharp. I didn't gloat. I didn't tell anyone why. I just folded that truth inside me like a secret I never needed to say out loud. And then, one night 2 weeks and 3 days after our wedding, my phone buzzed just past midnight. A message from an unknown number. You think you've won. But this isn't over. No name. No signature. But I didn't need one. I knew exactly who it was. And I smiled. Because the game might not be over. But I wasn't playing defense anymore.